Continuing with Lama Yeshe Losal Rinpoche's From a Mountain in Tibet, page 48. Chapter 4. Escape. On 23 April, we had left Domalakan without a clear plan. All Trungpa and Akon knew was that it was too dangerous to remain. During their travels over the previous years, they had seen enough to understand that the communists were steadily increasing their grip on our country. I suspect that on the day we set out for Lhasa, they must have known that at some point the capital city would fall to the communists, because the Chinese regime would not stop until it had secured its aim of integrating Tibet into its territory. Why then did we attempt to get there? I didn't ask this question at that time. I asked no questions. Initially, I was simply delighted to have escaped Domalakan. Later, when others did question Trungpa and Akon's judgment, I did not join in. I was too inexperienced. I had no opinion of my own at that stage, and I was too focused on survival. Now I think that we headed for Lhasa for the simple reason that it was impossible to imagine going anywhere else. The city was a symbol of enduring Tibet. It drew our hearts towards it. And it wasn't as if we lived in a world where travel was common. Most Tibetans passed their whole lives without straying beyond their neighboring villages. Bhutan, Nepal, even India were remote places that nobody save high lamas and occasional pilgrims visited. We were about a dozen people, and some 30 horses and 50 mules, on the day we rode down the mountainside away from the monastery. It was a relatively small group, but even so, all those animals made us conspicuous. We had brought no slow-moving yaks, but the mules were loaded with sacred texts and treasures, as well as provisions for our journey. Our immediate goal was the nunnery at the northern corner of the base of the mountain, where we would spend our first night. From there, we were heading for the Sabye Bridge over the river that divided communist-held territory from an area where the resistance forces were in control. That was about a week's travel away. I couldn't help feeling excited, as well as nervous. I hadn't left the immediate vicinity of the monastery in 3 years, and now here I was, riding a fine horse with a beautiful golden saddle that Akon had allowed me to use. Off on an adventure! It was spring, my favorite time of year. I thought my heart would burst for joy with every step my horse took. The moment of leave-taking itself had been difficult for everyone else in our party, especially Akon. As we rode out of the monastery grounds, I saw monks and lay people in tears. Akon Rinpoche, their abbot, the heart of their community, was leaving them. Outwardly, my brother maintained his usual calm. It was inconceivable that he would let anyone see that he too was upset. But I know it would have been terrible for him. His departure from the community in such troubled circumstances was a brutal cutting off from the social and spiritual system that had nurtured him from babyhood, that gave his life meaning and purpose. The emotion of the people of Dolma Lakan pierced even my self-interest for a moment, and I took care that my face expressed the seriousness of the occasion. I couldn't prevent my spirits from soaring as we descended the valley, though. I had been released from my personal prison, or so I thought at the time. We had told everyone at Dolma Lakan that we were going on pilgrimage to Lhasa, though they plainly understood that this was not the case. There were informers and spies everywhere, and Akon and Trungpa felt it would offer those who were left behind a shred more protection if they could say with conviction that they knew nothing of any escape plan. The communists would be looking for us, or, more explicitly, for Akon and Trungpa. On the third day, Trungpa and Akon changed from their monks' robes into laymen's clothes. Even my usual stoic brother looked distressed as he slipped his arms into a tunic, belted it around his waist, and pulled a hat down on his head. Trungpa told us he felt naked without his robes. He had been a monk since he was a young boy, as had my brother Akon. This alteration in their appearance made no difference for us to see them differently. But the symbolism of those robes was immensely powerful, especially for them. The following day we were received with all the customary ceremony by the monks and tulkus at Kino Monastery. Trungpa, who was always more transparent with his feelings than Akon, looked embarrassed at appearing to them without his monk's attire. We spent 3 days at the monastery, and it was good to rest and prepare ourselves for the next stage of our journey. There was a mood of deep anxiety among our group. We had no idea whether we would walk out and straight into a communist army patrol. We had heard enough stories to know it was probable that Akon and Trungpa would be executed on the spot. I was as terrified as the next person, but my fears were also laced with the adrenaline rush of release. The next point on our journey was the Sabye Bridge over the Gelmo Gulchu River. If we could cross that, we would be in resistance-held territory. Our host, the abbot of Kino Monastery, offered to ask some of the local lay people to go out on reconnaissance and inform us of any communist presence. This they did. So as we traveled on towards the bridge, we felt as if we were protected by a chain of villagers up on trails all around us, who were our collective eyes and ears. Continuing from page 48.
Yeah, it must have been very strange for everybody to start leaving it under those circumstances. There would have been a lot of fear and people being very frightened, especially with the bad news I've been hearing.
Yes.
You know, and especially with the Chinese forces getting closer to where they are staying themselves, you know. So
very dangerous.
It's amazing that they leave sooner than hang on to near the last minute, you know.
Yes.
So, but they did. They had commitments to fulfill first before they left, you know. Right?
Yes.
And well, it was sad to have to leave the monastery, you know. It might have been sad for Lama Yeshe at the time, but it was for other people, you know.
Yes.
But anyway, they had to go, and that was it. And it's amazing that they were able to stop at another big monastery on their journey to rest and get sorted out. Then they got the villagers all around there who went out using their ears and their eyes to scout to see if any signs of the Chinese around, you know.
Yes.
That was quite good. And then it's a good, and you never know, there's lots of spies and informers. They've taken a chance with it, people.
Yes.
They've been spies and informers with them as well.
That's correct.
And we're travelling with all those animals. It's a big giveaway right away.
For sure, it's a big challenge, isn't it, to have all of those animals.
They carry all their stuff, their relics and their texts and everything.
And they were trying to get things away from the monastery, clearly.
That's right, because they're destroying, ransacking the monasteries, weren't they?
Yes.
And destroying everything, burning texts and destroying the temple. So
they were trying to save everything they could save.
That's right. Because another thing they could have done too is they could have buried a lot of things round about.
They may have done so, we don't know.
Yeah,
they might have been leaving things off as they went along.
Yeah, I'm sure that could have happened. And then
scattered them.
Aye. So I don't know how far, so far I don't know how far the animals got with all that pack loading, you know.
That's right.
And then you never know, there might have been a time when someone had to give in. And I suppose they could still, if that was the case, they would bury many more stuff somewhere else, you know.
Yes. Well, it's interesting that they stopped their first night at the nunnery that was to the north of the mountain.
Yeah.
Because that made us realize that we have lots of questions about the nunnery.
That's right, yes.
So we wanted to ask Lama Yeshe Rinpoche a little bit more about what Akram Rinpoche's relationship was to the nunneries, if he was in charge of them, or if they had people in charge there that reported to him, or how it worked, because we were really curious about what it was like for those women there, and how much contact not only Akram Rinpoche had with them, but also if Lama Yeshe Rinpoche had any contact with the nuns while he was at Domalakan.
Aye, and surely the nuns would want to escape as well, so I don't hear much about that.
Yeah, so we're curious about what the nuns were going to do to prepare for the arrival of the Chinese, and if they were considered somewhat safer or not.
Yeah.
And also we were wondering about the placement of the nunneries, because there were 4, and we wondered if there was a geomancy involved in placing them in certain locations around the mountain
Yeah, well,
that would have followed Alchemy Rinpoche's specialty in geomancy.
probably something like that happened, you know. That would do. It could be. He usually likes to do the mo practice with the mother, you know.
Yes.
He could have done a mo.
Yes. And we also had not heard about this line of reincarnated tulkus that were women that is still a line that is there today, that Lama Yeshe Rinpoche mentioned a little bit earlier in the book. But this was all the questions that came to our minds that are now like organized in our presentation because of the party stopping the very first night at the nunnery.
Yeah.
And that has brought that back to our attention, that we were curious and wanted to know more about these women and anything that Lama Yeshe Rinpoche could add, because we don't know how we would find out this information otherwise. And it would be a beautiful enhancement to our understanding to have an understanding of what was going on for these women who were devoting their lives to spiritual practice.
That's true. That's right. Well, anyway, it's a good job it was the spring. The weather would be in their favour in the spring.
Yes.
Maybe in the winter they would be in trouble.
Much more difficult.
Yeah.
And they also left on the full moon, which is very auspicious.
Yeah, that would be full moon. That would be Amitabha Day.
Yeah, so they were lining everything up with as many favorable conditions as possible.
Yeah.
What an experience this would have been for all of them.
It was, yeah. I can understand why when we were leaving the people were in tears, you know.
Yes.
It's a world that you were used to for so long, and now it's being destroyed, and now they're losing the people they knew, who they depended on, you know.
That's right. They relied so much on Rinpoche's spiritual authority and guidance and his place within the community and within their hearts.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure Rinpoche would have said something to them before they left, whether saying he'll be back or something like that, you know.
And he was. he did fulfill that, didn't he?
That's right, yeah.
He did keep Domalakan in his heart and continued to keep them there, and then re-established a connection when he could.
And he got a new one built up higher up.
That's right.
A new monastery. So I don't know what the problem is with the old one. Maybe there was earthquakes or something like that, you know.
Do you want to ask Lama Yeshe Rinpoche?
Well, he's hearing me now, so he knows I'll be wanting to know that.
Okay, so also a question about the 2 different Domalakans.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're trying to make this a conversation, Rinpoche. So we're putting in our part from here and now, and then as you view it, we'll be able to share in the conversation about our reflections and carry on feeling the connection that we have, all of us together, just as strongly, or maybe even more strongly. It's a beautiful thing to share this book with you, Rinpoche.
That's it then, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Tari Turi Soha, Om Ahung Beza Guru Pema Siddhi Hum.
Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Tari Turi Soha, Om Ahung Beza Guru Pema Siddhi Hum.